Welcome to Know This Live. I'm Zinhle Essamuah. Joining me today is former Vice President Al Gore, longtime environmentalist and Nobel Peace Prize winner. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Zinhle. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Of course, and in the critically acclaimed film, The Inconvenient Truth, which came out in the early 2000s, it highlighted your campaign, talking about the climate crisis and the urgent need for action. In that film, you talk about the era of procrastination and how that era is ending into a period of consequences. Many of those consequences we're seeing right now. In your assessment, what does the United States need to prioritize when it comes to combating this climate emergency?
Well, it's very simple, really. We've got to stop putting all of this man-made global warming pollution into the air using the sky as an open sewer. And the U.S., in taking action ourselves, we then have to provide leadership for the larger global community. We're still in a period of history where the United States of America is the only country that can effectively provide the kind of leadership needed to face a global challenge like this. I'm very optimistic, I'll say, Zinhle, because President Biden and Vice President Harris have made this a priority, and we've seen them come out of the gates quickly since the inauguration. I think they're off to a great start. But now, at the end of this year, we have this conference called COP26, Conference of the Parties 26 in Scotland, Glasgow. And before then, the United States has to come out with a new national plan. President Biden has said he's going to release that on or before April 22nd, Earth Day.
Do you have a sense of what is in that plan, or what do you want to see out of that plan?
Well, I want to see a commitment for sharp reductions in the global warming pollution that causes the climate crisis. President Biden has already made a commitment to completely decarbonize the electricity grid by 2035. So I'm sure we're going to see in his budget actions that will move us quickly in that direction. He's also committed to proposing another 500,000 electric vehicle charging centers around the country, and that'll help to speed up the phasing out of the internal combustion engines in cars and trucks. That's presently the leading source of global warming pollution. But also, we need to continue shutting down the coal-burning plants and start shutting down a lot of the gas-burning plants, which we can do because electricity from solar and wind is now cheaper than electricity from burning fossil fuels.
Yeah, and you've talked a lot about the longevity of so much of this work. I'm mindful that in 2020, we saw a lot of increased calls for environmental justice and combating environmental racism. What does environmental justice mean to you?
Well, the impacts of environmental harms have been disproportionately placed on Black communities, brown communities, indigenous communities. Black communities in particular have been victimized because there's a record of these polluting facilities being disproportionately located in or adjacent to Black communities. We've got a big struggle going on in Memphis, Tennessee right now. I was participating at the invitation of local activists in Memphis this past Sunday in efforts to try to stop this high pressurized oil pipeline that they're trying to put right through an historically Black community that's actually a so-called freedmen's community established by freed slaves in 1865. Why would they put it there? Well, the pipeline company said they thought it was the path of least resistance. Well, that's kind of textbook environmental racism, really. And it affects the entire community because it goes right over a freshwater aquifer that is the sole source of drinking water for the 1 million people that live in Memphis and more in the surrounding area. And it's the most seismically active earthquake zone east of California.
And you've been very vocal about this specific issue, which for those unfamiliar is the Byhalia pipeline. You actually called it reckless, racist, and a ripoff. Why did you and why have you gotten so involved and passionate about this specific issue?
Well, I've been involved in this fight for a long time. And, back when I was in the Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate many years ago, I had hearings in Memphis about the location of hazardous chemical dump sites in and near Black communities. So this is a continuation of that effort. But now we're at a time when the country and the world are trying to shift away from burning fossil fuels and internal combustion engines toward the renewable energy. And at this moment, these oil and gas companies are in a frenzy to try to build new pipelines and get them done to export oil overseas, in this case, in order to establish this infrastructure that'll last for 50 years or more and establish it before the environmental restrictions are put in place. And we need to put them in place right now, because we're putting another 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution up into the sky every day. Each molecule stays there on average 100 years, and it mounts up, and it's now trapping as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day on the Earth. And that's ridiculous. That's why we've seen the temperature go up. That's why we've seen the destabilization of the polar vortex, that cold air that came in with the hard freeze in Texas and elsewhere, including Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi, where there's still boiling water because it wrecked their infrastructure. We've seen the fires this past year, all-time record fires burning. We had the most active hurricane season ever measured, hitting mainly the Gulf Coast, also the East Coast. We've got a historic drought underway in the Southwest now, the so-called millennial drought, and there are many other impacts. And so the scientists have told us they warned us this was coming. Not enough people listen, but they're telling us now it's going to get a whole lot worse even than this unless we stop using the sky as an open sewer.
Yeah, and you've been very vocal as you're showing us about this issue. Even on Sunday, as you spoke, you were introduced as the father of the modern environmental movement. How does that make you feel today, especially given the context that you just painted for us?
Well, first of all, I think that's probably an undeserved title because there have been so many women and men involved in this movement. I remember my mother reading aloud to me from Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring so many years ago. I know that Black activists in North Carolina and Virginia really kicked off the environmental justice movement. Cesar Chavez also, with his colleagues in the farm workers movement, kicked off an environmental justice push. So there are many who have contributed to the emergence of this movement. I'm honored to have played a part in this. And what I focus on now is trying to train many, many thousands of new grassroots activists, because these polluting companies have learned how to use their money and political power and lobbying and campaign contributions to bend the decisions in our governmental entities at the federal, state, and local level to serve their interests instead of the public interest. And the only way to counter that is to have many more people at the grassroots level speaking up and speaking out and proposing practical solutions that don't pollute. And we've seen the impacts hit hardest in Black, brown, and indigenous communities. And if we had paid more attention to what was happening in these communities in years past, we would have had earlier warning for what's happening to the entire world right now.
And you mentioned this collective energy and power around mobilizing for climate action. I know that you said in 2020 the American people demanded climate action at the ballot box. But we also know that there has been a lot of voter suppression efforts. What is your response to that? I know that 43 states are proposing more than 250 bills around this right now.
Yeah, it's a shameful campaign that is underway now. it's sort of classic Jim Crow, as Stacey Abrams said, Jim Crow with a suit and tie, and it's unjust. It's un-American. They're simply trying to make it more difficult for black people to vote, and for Hispanics to vote, and for indigenous people to vote. Really, they want to stop anybody from voting who they think might vote against their vision of America, which is the far-right ideological agenda and the economic agenda to promote the interests of the wealthy and powerful. Now, they seem to genuinely believe that our country would be better off if the wealthy and powerful had more control over all the decisions. But history proves that when we open up the right to vote and invite everyone from every background and from every different point of view to come and be a part of the collective decision making in our democracy, that's when we make better decisions. That's been one of the secret strengths of America's rise in the community of nations. And, you know, you go back to the founding of this country, and that elitist preference for the wealthy and powerful to control everything, that was an argument going on then. And we have to fight against that point of view in every generation. But history proves that when we succeed and get everybody the right to vote, then our whole country is better off.
And I know that a lot of these bills that have been attempting to suppress the vote are coming from the GOP. And I want to turn to faith, because I know that many on the religious right have been skeptical about the climate movement. But how has your faith informed your work around this?
Well, the earth is the Lord's, and you know, there's so many texts that tell us why respecting the creation is a way to glorify the Creator, and almost every religious denomination and faith tradition teaches those same timeless truths. And I would say that there is now a growing movement within faith communities to be a part of the collective demand to clean up our environment and stop this threat to humanity's future.
And I know one of the threats that we've talked about is the pipeline. You said that you may engage President Biden in conversation about stopping the development. Have you spoken with him?
I haven't spoken with him personally about this particular pipeline yet. It can be stopped by the city council in Memphis. It can be stopped by the county commission in Memphis. It can be stopped in the courts. But I have communicated with the White House, and I've communicated with people who I know have Joe Biden's ear. If I need to talk to him personally, I will. And Vice President Harris. You know, she prosecuted one of these pipeline companies when she was Attorney General of California for a big oil spill. If we had one of those big oil spills into this freshwater aquifer, it would be an historic calamity, like the Fukushima accident in Japan. You know, they built that on a fault in an earthquake zone. They thought, oh, it's not likely to happen. Well, it did happen. The largest earthquakes ever east of California, well, actually, largest earthquakes ever outside of Alaska in the United States took place in this Memphis area, in the earthquake zone that is still the most active in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. It's reckless. It threatens the groundwater. It adds to the climate crisis. It's racist because it goes right through this historically black community, and it's a ripoff because all of the risk is put on the people of Memphis, and none of the rewards go there. The rewards go to the shareholders of these big fossil fuel companies, and the oil goes to countries overseas that want to burn it in ways that will make the climate crisis work. There's nothing about this that's good for the United States or for the world or for the future of humanity.
And you, of course, are not the only one protesting this development. There were a lot of people on the ground, and I know that you're hosting a climate activist training to mobilize support for U.S. climate action generally. Why now?
Well, first of all, I was invited to Memphis by the local activists, including a young man named Justin Pearson in his 20s, who's extremely impressive. And the whole group there has really organized in such an impressive way. They have complete command of the facts, the scientific studies, the legal provisions that they're using. I'm very impressed with him. And I'm hosting the 46th training under the Climate Reality Project for people of all ages and all backgrounds, so that they will gain the skills and the knowledge to be effective, just like these activists in the Memphis Community Against the Pipeline organization there and the other organizations in Memphis. When you learn the causes of the climate crisis, the solutions to the climate crisis, and then gain more skills to be an effective advocate, you can join the many thousands, tens of thousands now, who are working actively to change policies and save our future.
And as you've outlined, the goal of this training is to equip participants to learn how to mobilize their communities. I know that the Climate Reality Leadership Corps was formed after your film, The Inconvenient Truth. You end that film by saying, in an effort to combat the climate crisis, we have everything but political will. But that political will is a renewable resource. Do you think we have that political will today?
We're renewing it every single day. I heard it and felt it with these young people in Memphis Sunday and with their elders as well. There's an 80-year-old black man in Boxtown, Tennessee. Boxtown was named because they used materials from the boxcars at the end of the Civil War that were left over to build their homes. Clyde Robinson, 80 years old, stood up and refused to sign the paper this pipeline company wanted him to sign to come across his land. So they sued him in court, and the community rallied around some of the other black property owners there who have maintained their property for all these decades. They said, no, you're not going to take the rights to our land. And the rest of the community is now rallying around them. The city council and the county commission have to act. But now this training, if I can just say, if you go to the climaterealityproject.org, that's where you can register. Registration is open for another several days. The training starts April 22nd. You can tailor the training with live and on-demand sections to get it all in ways that fit your schedule. It's an intensive course. You will make connections and form networks with others who, in the past, people who go through this training make a lot of new friends and contacts, and it really forms a lot of community ties. So I urge people to sign up, learn how to be a very effective and very knowledgeable climate activist.
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, and thanks to everybody for watching. This has been KnowThis Live. I'm Zinhle Essamuah.